Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot. I am a real-world airline pilot, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to use the Universal UNS-1 FMS. This has been recently added to the JustFlight Fokker F28 Professional version 2 update, but is also in the JustFlight Bae146 version 2 update, and is in several other aircraft around there, as it is, as the name implies, a universal FMS. It can be fitted to lots of different aeroplanes. As a result, you're quite likely to run into it, especially if you fly these retro aircraft or if you fly the Dash 8 Q400. The Dash 8 Q400 was the first airliner that I flew using the Universal UNS-1 FMS as well. So yeah, it has a special place in my heart. It's the first FMS I ever flew in the real world, and on the first airliner I ever flew. So I do like it. It has some things I really dislike, but some great features as well. So I'll be taking you through those features and how to use it in this video. We'll go all the way from initial setup through to flying it around in flight, holding, using the VNAV, and using the routing, and flying the arrival as well, and the landing. So yeah, it's a good bit of kit to learn. It's slightly different to the Boeing and Airbus way, so it is slightly different in quite a few ways actually, so it's good to get a bit of time to talk about it. Also, it is particularly useful if you're trying to fly into airfields with RNAV departures and arrivals, which these days is most busy, big, complex airports. So if you're planning to fly realistic departures and arrivals in the year 2025, then you really do want an FMS, and that's why it's great to see it fitted to these retro aircraft, so now we can get them in and out of these airports that otherwise we wouldn't be able to. It allows us to fly RNAV, SIDS and stars, so without reference to any radio nav aids. It also allows us to fly RNAV arrivals, even approaches if we wanted to get really clever. So let's get started. We're here in Edinburgh. We're going to do a short flight down to Manchester, and I'm going to show you how to load up everything you need in the FMS. Right, and here we are on the flight deck. Now I've loaded up with the engines running on the runway, but that's just for the sake of the video. It's the same as if we'd loaded up cold and dark, because the FMS is in its initializing state. So the only difference is if you load up cold and dark on stand, then you might actually see the FMS looking like this with the screen off. So I'm going to take you through everything you need to do to set it up. Now the first thing of course we want to do is turn it on, so press the power button and it will power up. You can see here it's fitted to the Fokker F28, but this will just say that your aircraft type, and then it will run through this little self-test, which is one of the few FMSs I've seen that does that, but there we go. So just checking everything's working. All the FMSs in the world do this, they just don't all show you this little pass screen. It's quite small, fitted down here in the center console wherever you can fit it, but that's an advantage of this little universal FMS, because you can squeeze it into flight decks that weren't designed to have it compared to the big sort of Boeing Airbus style ones. Right, on the init page, which is where it's going to bring you up initially, there's lots of amber and green. So what we're going to do is just accept this page. What it's telling us is the date, the time, the fact that it has GPS signal, and the position that is telling it where it is. Yeah, that all looks good. So let's hit accept. We can either hit enter, because accept is highlighted. So if it's highlighted in white like this and I hit enter, there we go, it turns green. We could have also, because of the arrow, selected this key next to it, but hitting enter, pretty straightforward. And there we go. It is telling me the nav database has expired. That's my fault. I'm having some trouble with Navigraph's hub, so I can't update it at the moment, but there we go, that is it. Good. Now, moving straight on, we go straight into the flight plan. So FPL for flight plan, and you'll see it has no idea, no clue what we're doing. We need to tell it everything. Now to find that information, I'm going to go over to my EFB, and I have loaded in my SimBrief flight plan, and that's written out here for me. Now of course you can have any flight plan that you want, get ready to go, you know, whether you use SimBrief or whatever, but this is the routing. So we're starting in EGPH, going to EGCC, and there's the route. Now the first thing we need to do is simply tell it where we're starting from. And you do this on the flight plan page, which is very unusual. Most airliners don't do that, but there we go. So we are in Edinburgh, Echo Golf, Papa Hotel. Enter, Edinburgh. And then you see it's in white. I can either hit this key here or hit enter, and it will accept it. And now, there we go. It knows we're starting from Edinburgh. Now, before we put in the rest of the route, I'm actually going to tell it the departure I'm expecting, because that would just build up the route quite neatly. So to do that, on the flight plan page, hit menu key. This is a terrible system, but this is how it is. Hit menu, and then you can see the flight plan menu. We can choose our departure. Depart. We're departing from runway 24 in Edinburgh, so number 2 is the key I need to enter. And this is where it gets weird. You don't type in 24. You don't select the key next to it. Like these are the things you might imagine you'd do. All you do is take the number next to the number of the runway you want. Madness, I know. I don't know how they came up with this, whether it's space reasons, because they can obviously fit more on the screen and they have keys on the side. I don't know. Ridiculous, but that's how it is, and it does work. So select the runway. I want not runway 2, runway 24, but it is number 2 on the list, so 2, enter. And if it's highlighted in white, you need to press enter for it to engage. And we're doing the GoSam 1 Charlie departure, so number 1 on that list, so hit 1, enter. And there we go. Now back to flight plan, and look, it has the departure loaded in. So that's pretty easy, right? If we look at the chart for GoSam 1 Charlie, taking off, runway 24, straight ahead to the Uniform Whiskey NDB, then right 262 to our altitude constraint, another altitude constraint at 14 miles out, Mavics GoSam. So all we need to do is have a look at our FMS, and I can actually check through all these waypoints. EGPH, then Uniform Whiskey, and you can even see the restrictions. Then the next restriction above 4,500 feet. Now the names are all a bit funny here, but this is just to do with the way the FMS codes it. But yeah, above 4,500 feet, then at 14 miles above 6,000 feet, and then Mavics. And then if I press next down here, I can see the next page, GoSam at 6,000 feet. So there you go. It's got the flight plan, it's got the constraints, it's worked. Really good. There's no navigation display to check it like you'd normally do in a modern airliner. If you have a Q400 though, or an airplane with EFIS, you would be able to check it. Right, so after GoSam, we want to do what? Well, we're joining an airway, Papa 600 to Fennec. So how do we add airways? And this is probably the hardest bit about this FMS, aside from the VNAV. So Papa 600 to Fennec, how do we do that? Well, what you have to do is select the waypoint after the waypoint. So I'm choosing the airway from GoSam, so I need to select after GoSam, which I do use this line select key. Point number 7, the waypoint after GoSam. Then, of all things, you hit list. Don't ask me why. Yeah, it's bizarre, but hit list. And now it's brought up the VORs. Completely pointless, I don't know why, but let's go to airways, which is over here. See air/way. Again, hideously formatted, but that's how you do it. Airway. And then from GoSam, and if there was more options, it would actually draw them out, number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, in that classic list with all the different airways. So you type in the number of the airway you want. In this case, it's option number 1. You see it's highlighted that box, so we need to press enter, and this is where it's neat. Now we tell it where we want to come off the airway. So I want to come off at Fennec, waypoint number 8. 8, enter. And there we go, GoSam Fennec. It just happens to be just one waypoint in the end, but there we go. Now from Fennec, we're taking another airway. We're taking Lima 612 to Lakey. So Fennec, Lima 612, Lakey. So same again. Waypoint after has automatically highlighted. And then I go list, airway. Lima 612 is option number 1 this time. Enter. And then to waypoint Lakey. Now I can't see Lakey here, can I? So I press next. Can't see it there. Next. Can't see it there. There it is. 57. Ridiculous. There we go. Type that in. Enter. And lo and behold, it's just one waypoint. So you can see why that system I think is a bit strange, but there we go. And that's it. You could, of course, also type in a waypoint. If I wanted to then go to the Honolulu VOR, for example, I can just type in HON and hit enter. And it will show me the VOR and the frequency. That's the correct one. Accept. And there you go, Lakey, Honolulu. So that you can either type in the waypoints or do the airway. If you've made a mistake, like I have, I don't want Honolulu, I can select it, select next to it, and then hit delete. Delete. And then see it's got white, so I need to hit again to confirm it. And there we go. That is our flight plan. That's a short flight plan, but that's what it is. And that has taken us all the way to Lakey, and then we're doing the Lakey 1 mic arrival apparently into Manchester. Now you might not know your arrival yet, so you don't have to type it in at this stage, but you could also type in your arrival and the landing runway if you happen to know where it is. On short regional flights like this, when I was flying around using this FMS in the Dash 8 Q400, then we would often type in the arrival because you'd know already where they're landing, most likely, and you might have already been there in that day as well, actually. So and you have the weather, so it's unlikely to have changed in that time. But yeah, so you have the option to type it in now, or we can do it later. So I'm actually going to type it in now, and this is where we carry on seeing the advantages. This is an RNAV arrival. You can only fly this if you have DME, DME, or GNSS, because it's using waypoints that are based off of not VORs. So your GASCO, for example, is just a waypoint in space. It's not. There's no VOR radial to get to it, so you need to have that information. And Lakey as well. You know, Lakey's just sat there as a waypoint. So this is why you need this FMS. If we didn't have this FMS, you know, before now, we couldn't do this. You're just flying around VOR to VOR, which is harder and harder to do as more radio nav aids are shut down. Anyway, Lakey 1 mic, which takes us Lakey, Dizzy, Rosen. So how do we enter that? And let's assume we're landing on runway 23 right in Manchester. Well, we've done the flight plan, so now we need to, on the flight plan page, press menu. Then, over here, we press arrive, and now, oh no, I've fallen into the trap. We haven't told it where we're going. It doesn't know where we're going. When you're building your flight plan, it doesn't know. So the first thing we need to do, of course, is select the next waypoint. You see it's duplicated it. You can actually duplicate. So that's not right. So I'm going to press it again to clear it out. There we go. Right, first thing to do, select the waypoint that you're trying to enter. You get the white box, and now you can type in Echo Golf Charlie Charlie. Enter. Manchester, accept. Now it knows we're going to Manchester. And you might think, well, that's not good. It's going Lakey direct to Manchester. We need the arrival, the ILS. Well, look, we can do that now by going to menu, arrive. Now it knows we're arriving in Manchester. So runway 23 right, number 4 on the list. Enter. Star Lakey 1 Mike is number 3. Enter. Approach ILS 23 right, number 2. And you can do RNAV arrivals. Not that there is an RNAV here, but you can do RNAV arrivals, but you can't use the vertical element, so you have to use higher minima, as it were, which we'll talk about another time. ILS, and we'll go via the centrefix, not by the MCT, we'll go via the centrefix, the transition. That means that it will just fly. I can show you what that means. If I bring up the approach charts, approach, ILS, 23 right. So if we were to do the via MCT, the airplane will plan to fly to the Mike Charlie Tango and then fly the full procedure. So we'll go outbound, fly this procedural turn, and then back down the ILS. I've told it to go via the CF, so it's going to head out to here and go via CF 23 right and then in the ILS. So number 2. Enter. And that's done. Now if we go to flight plan and I scroll through, next, 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 you can see there. It's got the arrival, Lakey, Dizzy, Rosen, CF 23 right, final fix 23 right, runway 23 right, Manchester. So that's done. Fantastic. Notice as well on the flight plan first page, oh, not that one. There we go. Uniform Whiskey's in magenta. That's the current 2 waypoint. And there's our altitude constraints next to it. Next step is to go to the fuel page. So find fuel over here. And here we go, fuel. It's got our basic weight. This is the weight of the airplane without anything on it. Then here's our passengers. And this is actually pre-populated for me. So we've got 62 passengers at, I'm not sure why it's gone to 52 pounds, it's only 20 odd kilos, so that isn't right. But by the way, if you want to change that from pounds, press menu, and then you can change it there, and then we'll go back to fuel. So it seems to have come up with some interesting numbers. I think it's just making it up based on what I put through the EFB. I think this would work better if you did it cold and dark. But anyway, the idea is to get the 0 fuel weight to the correct number. It doesn't really matter about the cargo or the passengers or where the weights are. It also doesn't matter too much overall, frankly, because the FMS calculations are relatively basic. It's not going to change much about your life, but you want this to be pretty close. So yeah, so if everything was perfect, you would just have the correct at number here, because this is the number, the weight per passenger. 16 kilos is obviously way too low, and then you'd have, so you just type in the number here of how many you've got. The basic weight you shouldn't need to change. You then type in your cargo. This will calculate your 0 fuel weight, which will be your basic weight plus the passenger weight plus the cargo weight. Gives you your 0 fuel weight, and then the fuel on top of that gives you your gross weight. So this is now accurate for today's flight. So you might need to manipulate those numbers a little bit, or hopefully it will work better if you do this from cold and dark. Over here you have the alternate fuel, the holding fuel, and the extra fuel, which adds up to your total reserve fuel. So on your flight plan you'll have the actual numbers. So my alternate fuel is actually 1 ton, so, or 990. So I'm going to hit alternate, type in 990. That is the fuel I need to get down to the alternate. Holding fuel is your final reserve fuel. It's misnamed here. So final reserve fuel for me is 714 kilos. So I'm going to type in 714, enter. And then your extra fuel, this is how much fuel do you want to have in your tanks on top of that when you land. I'm going to put 0. I don't need to have anything in particular right now. Gives us total reserves of 1.7 tons. Current fuel on board 3.7 tons. And if I check my flight plan, I can see that yeah, 3.7 was my block fuel. Needs to take off around 3.5 tons. I am burning fuel sitting here talking to you, but that's fine. So there we go. And you can type in this number, or if you don't want to, you can actually keep pressing back and then hit enter, and it will just bring up the number on board, which in this case is 3.6 tons, which looks about right because we got this empty center tank, and that's in our wing tanks. Good. On the next page, you can see we're on fuel page 1 of 2. I can actually go to the page 2 of 2. It shows you the current fuel flow, and then there's some more information that will be useful once we are underway. Please remember that on this fuel page 1, this does not change anything. You load up the airplane through the EFB. It does not work by doing this will not change the actual weights. So there we go. And remember to check your units. Kilograms in this case is what I want it to be. Good. Now for departure, you typically press nav and be on the main nav page. The reason is it shows you where you're going from, where you're going to, the distance, and the next waypoint after that. And then down here it shows you the cross-check error, headwind, current wind, and so on. So pretty handy. There is also a VNAV button. Does not apply to departure. Do not bother with this for now. You could, I suppose, but yeah, I wouldn't use it for departure. You need to judge this yourself, whether you're going to make these restrictions, which in a modern, this is an old jet aircraft actually, but it's a light one. It shouldn't struggle with these. Great, so I've set up my takeoff performance. You can do that just down here. We're going to rotate at 124 knots with flaps at 6, which is what I have set out on the wings. And we'll go for a full power takeoff, and off we go. Make sure you're in GPS over here. If you're in nav mode, it just goes to default course bar, which you can see currently is set to course 000, pointing off nowhere. So you press GPS, and now this is sequenced to the FMS. And you can see straight line ahead, 5.7 miles to the next waypoint. And if we look down at our FMS, that matches 5.7 miles, and it's course 239 straight ahead to the Uniform Whiskey, which is what it's got here, course 239 to the Uniform Whiskey. So it takes a moment to get your head around, but then it starts to make sense. So I'm going to release the parking brake. There we go. Airplane's rolling. Let's get some power on. Full power.
Power set.
Off we go. I do love this airplane. It's got plenty of them. Nice little, almost turbo jets they feel like at the back there. There's the rotate, cool, nice and gentle. I overdid it on my last video in this airplane. Up we go.
Positive climb. Gear up.
Gear up. And you can see we just need to follow this course bar straight ahead to 4.6 miles. Now,
Flaps up.
there we go. We can accelerate, bring the flaps in. Lower that nose.
Set climb power.
Power back a little bit for the climb. Trimming those down, and we're away. So how do we follow that using the flight director? Well, that's pretty straightforward. The flight director is over here. The pitch bar, unfortunately, is pretty useless. You can just set that wherever you fancy. But I'm going to move this dial here to 4 lock. And now you'll see it goes GPS, because we're in GPS over here. And now the flight director laterally is going to keep us on that, that line that we want to be on. So that's it, pretty straightforward. Remember the pitch, however, will just is completely pointless. I can, of course, engage the autopilot. We're accelerating through 200 knots now, so it's going to be useful to have the autopilot here to manage the climbs for me. So what I can do for that is turn on the autopilot. Yaw damper on, autopilot on. Now the autopilot's in, it's in basic mode, so you can see highlighted, it's in roll and pitch, absolutely useless. If I press beam, it will now, you can see here, go green on the GPS. It's now following that GPS line. This is more specific to the F-28, so I won't spend too much time on this. Let's imagine we were cleared up to 10,000 feet initially, so I put 10,000 feet in the window, alert on, auto on, and then I'm going to press IS, and we'll climb at 210 knots. There we go. So now the airplane should climb up and level off at 10,000 feet. It is on standard of 1013 already, because that's the QNH today, as ever in my videos, and we're following the GPS routing. So now let's just have a look at what the FMS is doing. Again, I don't want to get too bogged down with the F-28 procedures. Next waypoint, 5.1 miles away to D081E. No, it's not. It's not 5.1 miles away. That is, it was 5.1 between the two. So you can see here, we're going to pass that, and then it should go D081J. We're only 1.7 miles away. So yeah, that number won't update. I forgot about that. That's not a great feature, is it? Shows you the cross-track error, your ground speed, bearing, and the current wind. So in just a moment, that'll sequence over. And we can also go to the flight plan page and see the same thing, and it would jump to the next one. Let's bring the power back a bit so we level off at 10,000. That's going to upset the autopilot. It's quite a basic autopilot. It doesn't like it if you do two things at once. And there we go. Now we're on to the next waypoint, and it's sequenced through. Go to nav, to the J point, and next up is Mavics. So there you go. It has successfully navigated through the waypoints, and as we pass, it will fly its turn. And if I bring up the chart, we'll be able to see this. So there we are. We're currently routing on this waypoint, then it'll sequence the Mavics, and then it'll fly that next turn. So we're climbing up to 23,000 feet now in IAS mode. So let's have a look at what might happen with the FMS. This is the important thing today. So we can see our waypoints. It's routing to Mavics. It's trying to head straight there. Now I might get cleared direct to GOSAM. So how do we do that? No surprise, DTO. Press DTO, then choose the waypoint. Number 6 is GOSAM. It's using this list system again. But nice use of colour. You see the green are the waypoints and the magenta is the current active one. I like it. And I like the fact you can go to previous waypoints in case you sequence past Maxton. Anyway, direct GOSAM, there it goes. And now the course bar's turned left and it's going to fly straight towards it. Pretty great, right? If we go down here now on the nav page again, we can see, as we saw, you've got your cross track, headwind, wind, you know, some mildly useful stuff here. If you go to fuel and then next, we get some slightly more useful information. It knows the current fuel flow, the current ground speed, and it gives us the predicted fuel on board. Overhead in Manchester, 1.5 tons, which is a little bit low. We want it to be 1.7 tons. That will improve as we level out in the cruise and so on. This is a little bit, it's not very accurate. It's not like an Airbus or a Boeing FMC in that sense. But up we go. Good stuff. Just bring the power back a little bit for climb thrusts so we don't end up burning through all that fuel. So that's how you do a direct to. Other things that you can do through the FMS if you want to be really clever, oh no, we don't want to do aileron trim, is you can go to the nav page and do some headings. Don't ask me why you'd ever want to do this, but I can actually, while still in LNAV mode, tell it to fly heading, let's say west 270. So type in 270, enter. There's no intercept. It won't intercept the current navigational path. But if I press it again, it goes into heading cell, and now it will just turn, while staying in LNAV mode, it will turn on heading 270. I really don't know why you'd ever want to do this. So I'm actually going to tell it to re-intercept the line. So I'll tell it heading 210 to take it back towards the line. So if I type in 210, enter, and then enter again because it's flashing. Now it will turn left, and then I'm going to hit intercept. So now it will take heading 210, and then because I've told it to intercept, it will re-intercept that line and carry back on with the path, which is much better. Honestly, I don't know where the idea for that came from. There must be reasons, and I just haven't encountered them. Good. There's also a maneuver option. If we go into maneuver, we can actually type in a hold. So why might we do that? Well, that's going to be particularly useful for our arrival because we don't want to go past Rosen unless we're cleared to, and there is a hold at Rosen. So let's put it in. Holding definition, where are you going to hold? So you can see my waypoint Rosen isn't on here, but we're on page 1 of 3. So if I press next, and next, there's Rosen, point number 15, this list system. So at Rosen, the hold is 172 inbound, right-hand turns. So I need to change this. Inbound, I want 172, enter. Turns to the right, correct. 1 minute, correct, because I'm assuming we'll be nice and low. So 1 minute's the key criteria here, and it'll be a direct entry. Yes, because we're coming in at this angle. You can actually change that if you want to. Now, I've told it the definition, I'm going to hit arm. So there we go. If I go back to flight plan and scroll next, I think we will see the hold at Rosen. There it is, hold 172. And there you go. So now we've got holds. You know, this is such a step up from flying this aircraft when you're just flying it around in, you know, radar nav aids with VORs trying to fly manual holds. That's high workload stuff, especially with the basic autopilot and no water throttle. This is really going to change that and make this a viable airplane. There we go. There's the big turn. So it has re-intercepted, and now we are making a left turn onwards. But yeah, this is going to make a big difference to allow you to fly these arrivals and approaches. It's really great. Right, the next thing I want to do, because we're going to actually get to Lakey pretty quickly like this, because this is a jet aircraft. It's a quick airplane for this route. The next thing I want to do is take a look at the descent. So you can actually get it to calculate the top descent. You can see here, it knows that at the sense fix of 23 right in Manchester, we want to be above 3,500 feet. But at the final fix, we want to be at 3,500 feet. If I press previous, it actually knows also that we want to be at Roslyn at 7,000 feet. So it has the altitude constraints, it has the information. So how do I get it to tell me when to start my descent? Well, that's pretty straightforward. If I press VNAV here, you can see here, Lakey's at 20,000 feet, Roslyn at 7,000 feet. So it knows where we need to be there. So what I want to do is say, well, I want to descend, and I need to tell it the vertical speed I want to descend at. And that's what's unusual. So you might be wondering, well, why is it like that? Why doesn't it just know the idle descent profile? Well, it doesn't have the information. That's a lot of performance information that Boeing and Airbus spend a lot of time, and Embraer and everyone else, putting information into their FMSs so that they can understand and calculate a descent. And they're not always successful. The 787 often gets its descents slightly confused, especially at the start. So what we need to do is say, well, what's a sensible descent rate for this airplane? Well, let's go down at, I think, jet aircraft like this, I think 2,000 feet per minute. That's what we used to do in the Dash 8 Q400. I think that's a reasonable descent. It will be pretty close to idle for most of the way down. So select target vertical speed, 2,000, enter. And now it can tell me when it thinks I need to descend and the vertical speed I need to make the restriction. So let me explain what that means. So let's just level off here. We're going to level off at 23,000. I'll explain what that actually means. Okay, here we are, 23,000 feet. So the first point we want to descend to is Lakey at 20,000 feet, and then Roslyn at 7,000 feet. So now I've told the airplane, it already knew that, information from the charts. So I've told it I want to descend at 2,000 feet per minute. At this speed, that currently equates to a 3.6 degree glide slope. So that's about right. Now it knows the target vertical speed I want. It has calculated a 2,000 feet per minute descent to the waypoint Lakey to arrive there at 20,000 feet. So if I want to arrive at Lakey at 20,000 feet, then if I want to use 2,000 feet per minute, I need to start my descent in 75 nautical miles. You've also got this number here just below. It says from present position to Lakey is 83.1 or 83.0 nautical miles. And then there's this number here. This is saying you need to be 200 feet per minute to make it. So if I started a 200 feet per minute descent right now, I would arrive at Lakey at 20,000 feet. But the point is that would be a 200 feet per minute the entire time. So it's not very efficient. So we don't want to do that. I've told it I want to do 2,000 feet per minute. Now you can change that. Let's say I wanted to do 1,500 feet per minute. I can type that in and watch the top of descent. It jumps a little bit later. Sorry, it's a little bit closer to us. That number's gone down. If I want to descend at 500 feet per minute, select first, 500, enter, it's only 44 miles away. So you have to learn your aircraft. I can't tell you what the 146 or the F-28 actually wants to descend at. I'm guessing 2,000 feet per minute. As an average is a pretty reasonable rate of descent. It certainly is what we would do in the Q400. Now you're wondering, well, how do I fly that descent? So I start my descent here at 68.5. How do I fly it? Well, in the F-28, I'm going to use vertical speed mode, which is down here. I press VS and wind this, and I can simply wind this selector. I can actually pre-select it now. Although I don't think procedure would be you'd leave it there in the cruise, but I can set it to 2,000, then just hit VS on, monitor the vertical speed to make sure it's at 2,000, and then we can just monitor this page and adjust accordingly as required, which I'm going to show you how to do. Of course, you could just type in, 2,500 feet per minute, and then just start your descent in IS mode, and then bring the power to idle. But that'll be a little more variable, a little less controlled, but that is an option. Crucially, there is no mode in this aeroplane, or with this FMS, that is going to allow it to fly the descent and fly those restrictions for you. Remember how in the A320 or any of the Airbuses and the Boeings, we can actually go into a sort of a VNAV or a managed descent mode, and the aircraft will obey the restrictions that it has in the FMS. This one will not. If I put it into vertical speed mode, which is what I'm going to do, it's just going to carry on down. It knows these, but the information is not being passed on to the airplane. It's just being told to us as the pilots. So we have to consult this page to be ready for it. Right, so here we are reaching the top of the descent, and as you can see, weirdly, it says from present position to Lakey at 20,000 feet, 1,300 feet per minute required. So why is my top of descent already arriving? Why is it already in 4 miles? Well, I think it's going to be because it's thinking about the Roslyn restriction at 7,000 feet. So it knows that we need to actually start our descent now to meet the 7,000 feet restriction, because that is not so far away. That's only another 40 odd, 30, 40, yeah, 40 odd miles away. So that I think is what's going on there. So we go back to VNAV, we're reaching top of descent. Oh, actually, no, maybe it's going to... Yeah, it has accelerated rapidly in the last few seconds. So here we go, top of descent, 900 feet per minute required. We asked for 2,000, so it's time to go down. So let's put in... Now, you would have all probably negotiated with air traffic a bit sooner. 20,000 feet, VS 2000. And of course, manual thrust on this airplane, probably quite a few airplanes that use this system. So I'm actually going to go to idle thrust, because I think idle thrust 2,000 feet per minute will be not far off. I'm just going to silence that horn. So now if I look down, you sort of have to keep updating it. So we started roughly at top of the descent. We're doing 2,000 feet per minute, as I can see here, 2,000 feet per minute. Is this working? Well, it hasn't quite worked. I made an error here. I was too late to start my descent. So look, the requirement is actually 2,300 feet per minute now, and it's going to keep increasing because, of course, if you're not descending quick enough, then you're going to have to... it will continue to get worse. So let's go to 2.5, and let's see if that can catch it. And it has. So now we're doing 2,500 feet per minute. Sorry, we're doing 3,000 feet per minute. Crikey, that's quite a descent. The speed might start to creep up. And this is where this VNAV is not as handy as the ones in the Boeing and the Airbus. You have to keep searching information. You have to do things yourself. Bit of speed brake needed. And there we go. Now we're almost 2,000. We've overdone it. I was going more than it needed. So that number is reducing down. And now it just needs 1,000 feet per minute and we'll make the restriction. I'm actually not going to fiddle with it because it's going to do its own... Oh no, I need to tell it to level off. It's done the classic. Let's put it into out hold mode. There we go. We have an altitude bus there. Another great feature of a system like this is that it's very easy to altitude bus. So yeah, you have to report that to air traffic. But there we go. So I'll let it climb back up a little bit to its 20,000 feet with 250 knots. Next step is the descent down to Rosen. Rosen is, and you can see here, it's reset itself. So 5.9 nautical miles to top of descent for our 2,000 feet per minute descent to beat Rosen at 7,000. And it's the same again. So I'll show you what happens if we start down early, shall I? So let's start down at now. Let's say air traffic control asks us to go down now. They say, please descend 7,000 feet and be there by Rosen. So we'll go BS. I'll power back a little bit, but not all the way because we're only going down a little bit shallower. And I'll put in 7,000 feet. 7. There we go. And we're descending. And must remember, pre-select auto on or it won't do it. And now if I look down here, we've already started descent. So the current required is 1,700 feet per minute. And I'm doing 1,500. So I could set 17 and we'd get to Rosen at the right altitude. You know, that is a legitimate way to do it. It's not the most efficient because it's not idle. So the best way for saving fuel and engine wear and so on would be, let's go to a nice shallow descent to just about 1,000 feet per minute. And we'll do that for a while. Now, another thing that can change this is the winds can obviously mess this up. So this number is constantly dynamically changing. Also, the speed. So if I now accelerate the airplane to 300 knots, this would feel very strange to have all that power come on at this stage in the flight. As I accelerate, you'll see the required number and the angle constantly change. See how top of descent suddenly jumped to us. Now it needs 2,000 feet per minute as it recalculates because we're going so much faster. And I'm just going to keep accelerating. Have we got the speed brake in? We have. Wow, it doesn't have much spare thrust, this airplane at this altitude. I thought we'd be going a bit faster than this. But we're just gently descending, but you'll see that that required vertical speed is going to jump up and up and up now as we accelerate and accelerate and accelerate. So there you go, a 2,000 feet per minute rate of descent at this speed is only a 3-degree descent. And that will shallow out because, of course, the faster you're going, the higher the vertical speed for the same angle. So yeah, it's quite an involved system. There you go, 2,600 feet per minute now required as we hit 300 knots. And yeah, we could do that if I now go over and set 2,600 feet per minute. Bring the power back again. Same old, same old. We'll come down here and we'll see this number keep changing, and hopefully it will stabilize at the vertical speed you're doing. Alternatively, 2,900 feet per minute is the required rate of descent. If I just want to get the airplane down, because I know we're high now, I'm just going to press IS, throttle back to idle. This is more F-28 specific stuff really. And then you just got to keep an eye on your vertical speed and check that it stays higher than the required number in here. That's basically the main thing. Don't get lured into descending too early or too low to the ground as well. Remember, some of the altitude restrictions are going to be minimums that you can go to be safe. So you don't want to get too low. You don't want to always be low. You know, you've got to manage all of that yourself. You've got to know where the terrain is beneath you. The joys of this style of flying, really, it's much more involved. There's a lot going on. We still monitor all these things on a modern airliner, but they are just more likely to have management systems that are sorting them out for us. You know, like I say, the Boeing or Airbus would be bang on the profile it calculated, which would take into account all these constraints for us. We wouldn't have to be monitoring it or constantly adjusting it in the same way. We do monitor it, but we wouldn't have to constantly adjust it. There you go, 2,500 feet per minute would now be acceptable because we're doing way more than that. So, yeah, those are some ways around it. Next up, we'll enter the hold. By the way, we do also have on the Perf page some more information that we can put out of the FMS. Perf, and then here you go, current tailwinds, temperature, and then it's got here the fuel figures as well as on fuel page 2. So probably Perf is the easier page to go to for that. So current weight, this is useful for checking if you're not over your landing weight. Current fuel on boards, sorry, the fuel on board when you get there. So we've got 2682. Somehow I think we're going to get there with 2634, which is not quite true. So yeah, it's not overly reliable. You more need to be calculating this yourself. So how much fuel have we got? I've got 1.4. Yeah, so I've got 2.8 tons of fuel on board. So I've got a ton of fuel to get to Manchester now, which I think is reasonable. We're arriving at 7,000 feet now. We are going a bit fast at 300 odd knots. So let's have a look at our nav page, and we can see here we're coming up on Rosen. So Rosen's the next waypoint. In 5 miles we'll arrive at Rosen, and the airplane should hopefully enter a hold. And I can check that on my chart. So let's get the speed back for holding speed. We are way too fast to arrive at a hold. Very effective air brake on this airplane, speed brake. So there we are, arriving at Rosen, and if I get the speed back to a sensible one. Now, I have to be very careful doing this because we are manual thrust, so I don't want to get too slow. We'll do 210-ish knots, which I think it will be able to do on its own. And it should, there you go, 2 waypoint is in the hold. And indeed, there we go, aircraft flying around the hold, and the course bar is updating accordingly. Now, if air traffic says, okay, finish this hold and then carry on with the arrival, what do? It's actually quite easy. You go back into maneuver, and then you can see here we can adjust the holding definition. You can disarm the hold, which would stop it flying it if you were if it would stop it flying it if it was in front of you still. But we're currently in the hold, so I'm going to hit proceed, and then you have the option to continue hold. So now I've hit proceed, I can go back to nav, and what it would do is, there you go, finish the hold and go to the center fix. So now it would just do one hold, which we can see it doing here. It would just do the one, and then it will carry on with the flight plan, which will be Rosen, and then out to the center fix for 23 right. Pretty straightforward. And I'm afraid that's about it, really. The rest of the flight is going to be flown in navigation mode, as we were, GPS, waypoint. I have the VNAV option down here to help me out if I need any more restrictions, so it will tell me the vertical speed to get to the next waypoint at the right altitude. And I'll fly the ILS as I would in this aircraft, and I'll fly the landing. There's not much else to say. So in summary, for this FMS, we've seen how to load up a flight plan. We've seen how to do a direct to once we're underway. We've seen how to look at the restrictions on the flight plan page, the altitude restrictions. We've seen how to load in the weights on the fuel page. And we've seen how to do holds, nav, maneuver, and then you can do your holding definition, and then you want to leave the hold. I've done continue. I've done the exit hold there. We've seen the usefulness of this nav page, and we've seen the VNAV. Crucially, basically with the VNAV, you need to type in the vertical speed, otherwise it doesn't tell you anything. And then fly the vertical speed that it's telling you, and you'll be in the right place at the right time. just to prove my point. There we go. It's hit rosin, and now it's heading over to, I assume, CF. If I go to the nav page, sorry it's so small, but there it is, CF 23 right in magenta. That is over here, and we're going to be setting ourselves up for the ILS. So of course, to do that, we do need to tune everything. The airplane, even though I've told it I want to fly the ILS 23 right, it can't actually tune any of that stuff. Certainly not automatically. So yeah, 1095, course 232. Let's set that up. By the way, I absolutely love what JustFlight did with these dials. They're all so easy to use and scroll between. I don't know how some airplanes get it so wrong, because it clearly is possible. 232. Right, let's bring it in for landing. We're running a little bit fast here, so just bring that power back.
100 feet to minimum.
That's the minimums warning horn. So there's a weird
Minimums.
buzz.
Minimums.
Oh, we're getting definitely a little bit high here. Let's try and keep it stable. There we go, speed to go back, get the power back on, otherwise you'll find yourself falling out the sky.
50, 40, 30, 20, 10.
Nice and low to the runway, this airplane. Easy to overflare though. There's touchdown. And we'll let it settle down. Excellent, welcome to Manchester. I do find the rudder control quite tricky on this one, but that could be the Xbox controller. No auto brakes. So we'll get on those for our exit. That still feels pretty fast. Awesome.